Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we talk about evidence, before we talk about the law, we have to begin with what every person in this courtroom already knows. What happened at Appalachia High School was tragic. It was horrific, it was terrifying, and it was heartbreaking. Nothing said in this courtroom can change that. Nothing that I'm going to say is meant to diminish that. You're going to hear emotional testimony, you'll see photographs, you'll see videos, you'll hear about the fear, the chaos, and the terror that Colin Gray inflicted on that school and this community. But your job is not to decide whether or not that was tragic. We all know that it was. Your job is to decide something much more specific. Your job is to decide whether or not Colin Gray knew what Colt was going to do. Because the state is not just prosecuting the shooter in this case, they're prosecuting the father as well. I want you to remember something as we begin. The courtroom is not a place where we punish people because we're angry, where we punish people because we're grieving. It's not a place where we punish people because we feel someone has to pay. This is a place where we follow the law. And the law requires proof, and the law requires evidence. And the law requires that the state prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. That burden never shifts, not for a single moment. The state's theory will be simple. They'll tell you that Colin Gray allowed his son access to firearms and ammunition. Colin Gray had warning signs, and then Colin Gray, knowing that these were warning signs, consciously disregarded those warning signs. That he should have known his son would, not could, that his son would harm someone. And because the son later committed this school shooting, therefore Colin Gray must be guilty, must be criminally negligent, because he knew this would happen. That's their theory. But what you'll learn from the evidence is that case is not that simple. The evidence will show a teenager who is struggling mentally, a teenager who is deceptive, a teenager who hid his true intentions from everyone, from his family, from his counselor, from his siblings, from DFACS, from law enforcement, and most especially from his father. The evidence will show a father who did not ignore his child. He did not abandon his child. He did not turn his back on his child. The evidence will show between Colin Gray and Colin Gray daily contact, daily effort, and active steps by Colin Gray to seek mental health intervention for his son through the school. The evidence will show that the most important facts, the planning of this shooting, the concealment of this shooting, and the timeline of this shooting were hidden by Colin Gray from his father. That's the difference between tragedy and criminal liability. And this case is about whether the state can prove criminal liability by showing that Colin Gray knew that Colt was going to do this, knew that Colt was going to harm someone else. You cannot hold someone criminally responsible for failing to predict what was intentionally hidden from them. You'll learn about Colin Gray's state of mind that at the time no one knew. You will learn that months before the shooting, Colt had notes hidden on his cell phone from April of 2024, private notes that appear to be the planning stages of this shooting. Those notes were not known to Colin Gray. Those notes were not shared with Colin Gray. There is no evidence of that. You will learn something else. The plans reflected in those notes show that the shooting was initially planned for February of 2025 to coincide with the anniversary of the Parkland High School shooting committed by Nicholas Cruz. The plan reflected in those notes was that that time was going to be when the shooting happened, not in September of 2024. Something changed. The evidence will suggest and support that Colt accelerated his plan. And there's evidence suggesting that that acceleration was tied to the fact that Colin Gray was actively seeking mental health treatment for his son through the school at that time. There are emails to the counselor. There was paperwork he filled out. There was already in motion, already in place, an appointment for Colt to meet with the counselor and to meet with the mental health specialist the very next day, September 5th. Colin Gray did not know about the plans. Colin Gray did not know that Colt was planning to do this and that he would in fact go harm someone else. The behavior that Colt exhibits, the behavior that you'll find from his notes in his cell phone, from his text messages, show that he was actively keeping this information from others, from law enforcement, from DFACs, from counselors, from professionals who know to look for these signs, and most especially from his dad. The state will point, and they've already mentioned to you, an incident in May of 2023 when 2 Jackson County sheriffs went to Mr. Gray's home to talk to Colt. Fortunately, this interaction is on body-worn camera video, so you'll get to see the whole episode. You will see that Colin Gray is cooperative. You'll see that he brings his son out. He tells the officers that he takes this kind of thing seriously. He tells the officers, you tell me that he did it and those guns are gone today. That is on video. That is undeniable. But the officers don't tell him that. The officers say that they're not sure that it was him that made the threat. He tells the officers that he has a gun in the home. He says that he has a son who is somewhat isolated, who's on the computer a lot. He says that when he was young, he used to enjoy hunting with his father, that they would go deer hunting. And so he was introducing Colt to deer hunting, that they had gone out a year before. Colt had killed his first deer, that the gun that they had was for deer hunting. The gun was to get him outside, which the officer in the video approves of. Get him away from the computers, that's good. But Colin tells the officers, if you think this is him, tell me, because those guns are gone today. And that is not what he's told. It shows that Colin, had he known, would have removed those guns. But he didn't. Let's talk about what Colin actually did, because this case is being framed as if Colin Gray didn't do anything. The evidence will show the opposite. You will hear that when the family transitioned schools, it was Colin Gray who registered Colt. You will hear that Colin Gray worked full-time, was raising 3 kids on his own due to the kids' mother's addiction problems, due to DFAC saying that she was not allowed to have unsupervised contact with him, due to the courts in Barrow County saying she was not even allowed in the same county where these kids lived. Colin was doing everything. Colin is the one that filled out the counseling referral forms. Colin is the one that communicated with the school counselor. Colin's the one who discussed the evaluation. Colin was the one who was coordinating mental health services through the school. Colin is the one that filled out the paperwork to get the assessment done on September the 5th. You'll hear that the school had arranged, and it had already been taken care of, that Colin had completed everything he needed to for the assessment. You're going to hear from the grandmother who says that they wanted to take him to Advantage Behavioral in Athens, that it was urgent. This comes out after the shooting. The grandmother will also tell you she had absolutely no idea that Colt had any interest in Nicholas Cruz or school shootings in general until after the shooting happened and they were making the 4.5-hour trip from Fitzgerald, her and her daughter Marcy, at which point Marcy said, well, Colt does like this school shooter named Nicholas Cruz. That's the first time that you hear Debbie learns any of that. You're going to see text messages from Debbie in August and September of 2024 when she says that they were so strongly trying to get him into a facility. What you're not going to see in those text messages is any urgency on Debbie's part. You're not going to see anything from Debbie saying, get the guns out of the house. You're not going to say anything from Debbie saying, I'm worried about Colt, we need to get him there today. Nothing. They don't talk about it at all. Debbie doesn't mention it one bit. Now, she mentions it in hindsight after the fact, and Marcy does the same thing. Who is Colin Gray? He's a working father raising 3 kids by himself. He had responsibilities, he had a job, he had a family to keep afloat. He had 2 other kids besides Colt. He was involved. You'll see his text messages to his children. You'll see his text messages to Colt. This is not a parent who's turning his back on what's going on right in front of him. Let's talk about what you're not going to hear. Because sometimes what you don't hear in a case like this is just important as what you do. Sometimes the absence of evidence tells you more than the evidence itself. You will not hear a text message where Colt says to his dad, I'm going to shoot a school. I'm bringing a gun tomorrow. I have a plan. I'm going to hurt someone. You won't see a single message like that. You will not hear that Colt ever told his father about the notes on his iPhone. You will not hear that Colt ever showed his father a plan. You will not hear that Colt told his father he was accelerating the plan. You will not hear that anyone called Colin Gray and said, your son is about to commit a shooting. You will not hear that law enforcement told him, your son made a credible threat. You will not hear a school official warn him his mental health treatment is imminent. He needs to see someone today. You will not hear anyone from DFACS told him, we have serious concerns that he's violent, that he's going to hurt someone else. You will not hear anyone say that they contacted the police on September 3rd and said there's a school shooting about to happen. You will not hear that Colin Gray encouraged violence. You will not hear that he glorified violence. You will not hear that he dismissed a specific credible threat. In fact, you'll hear something entirely different. You'll hear that Colt suffered from anxiety. You'll hear that Colt suffered from depression. You'll hear about his panic attacks. You'll hear that he didn't like going to school. These are serious issues, but these are not the same as homicidal ideations. These are not the same as suicidal ideations. These are not the same thing as proof of a probable school shooting. The state will ask you to connect dots after the fact using hindsight. Dots that became visible only after the shooting itself. But what you will not hear is evidence that at the time, Colin had sufficient warning that this outcome was probable. Not imaginable, not possible, but probable. That Colin knew that his son would harm someone else. You'll hear testimony from Colt Gray's counselor. And that's important because it gives you a professional's perspective on what was going on with Colt in the weeks leading up to the shooting. You will hear that Colt presented as a student suffering from anxiety and emotional instability, panic symptoms, an inability to function in class. And you'll hear something very important. You will hear that even the school counselor, a professional trained, did not perceive Colt as a threat. She described him as nice, respectful. That matters, because if a trained counselor did not perceive the imminent violence, then it's unreasonable to claim that the father should have seen it himself. You'll also hear testimony from her about how the father did in fact take steps to get him mental health treatment. The father was in communication with the counselor. The father submitted the paperwork. The father completed the referral, and the father was pursuing intervention. You'll hear the therapist was essentially scheduled to meet with Colt the very next day. The father was not ignoring the problem. Colin Gray was acting. They want you to hold him responsible because they don't think he was acting fast enough. You'll hear from his daughter, Colt's sister, Jenny Gray. Her testimony will corroborate the concealment that Colt was perpetrating on his family, on his dad. She'll testify that Colt was secretive, that he was constantly deleting and opening new accounts on Discord to avoid detection, that he was using usernames that were combinations of alphanumeric combinations. You'll find that he would not discuss, based on the statement that Jenny gave on September 4th of 2024, that he would not discuss school shootings or school shooters in front of his father. You will hear on the morning of the shooting, Colin Gray had already left home. You will hear that Colt, when he did discuss school shooters with Jenny, made her promise not to tell his dad. You'll hear that that morning on September the 4th, Colin Gray got up and took his youngest son, Coley Jr., to school, that he left before Jenny and Colt did to catch the bus. You will hear that Colt had to go and find the gun because it wasn't in his room, that he had to find the ammunition that wasn't in his room, and that he had to put them in his backpack, and that he had to conceal the rifle that stuck out of his backpack 18 to 24 inches with a poster board. And he put a hat on top of it. It proves concealment, it proves independent action, and that matters because it's consistent with what Colt had done the whole time, which was conceal this plan from his father. Remember, the state says that he knew. They said that he knew this was going to happen. That he knew, not that it was possible, that he knew Colt was going to go and harm someone else. But you can't consciously disregard a risk that you're not aware of. And you can't say something is probable when it's being hidden from you.